Hi guys, Evan Jones here. Welcome to the LSAT video hour. Actually, that's not the name of this. We're just doing a PT explanation, PT 55 Game 4. And excuse me if I'm a little shaky because I haven't done a video in a couple weeks. I've been in Japan on vacation. Best time of my life, but maybe my LSAT skills weakened a little bit because I was so busy thinking about Japanese. Anyways, this is one of the hardest games probably of all time. And it comes up a lot when talking with tutoring students because there's a rule in here that I think is a little confusing. It's not so clear whether it's telling us that somebody has to stay on after the bus leaves a certain stop, or if it's okay if they get out at that stop. And we'll talk about that. That rule had a lot of people kind of mad when this test was administered because maybe under pressure it was hard to understand. Anyways, let's take a look at the setup. We have a shuttle van stopping exactly 4 times, so we know we're in a linear game sort of world here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these 4 stops have names. We've got Fundy, Los Altos, Mineola, and Simcoe. I don't know where this is exactly in the world, but it's neither here nor there. So I'm going to line those up right where I'm going to put them. These will be our stops. And then on top, we have 4 riders that are getting out. We've got Greg, Jasmine, Rosa, and lastly, VJ. And now here's where things get tricky, right? Up till now, this is just a basic, tiered ordering game where we're going to be throwing in our stops down here on this level, and then on this level we'll be throwing in the riders. But it gets a little bit trickier when we go to the rules. First we know that Los Altos is either the first or the second stop. So there's definitely an L going in one of these 2 places. If you see it in 3 and 4, you're wrong. Next one, Rosa is still on board when the van reaches Mineola. So what this means, and this is a bit tricky, is that when we stop at Mineola, Rosa can either get out there, or you can have Mineola and then Rosa getting out at a later stop. So either of these are possible, right? The one thing that's out is we can't have Rosa getting off sometime before Mineola. That would be a bad scene. So just keep that in mind. And once you've got a handle on that, really, you're not going to be too bad. A lot of people had the issue where they thought it only meant this, maybe, But I think once you start doing the problems, it becomes clear that, this is also possible. And always, just as a side note, if there's some situation where you're not really clear on this, what this rule means, generally if you start doing the game, it's going to become apparent, often from the acceptability question, which is possible. So you can clarify your understanding of the rules that way in an emergency. But usually the LSAT is, pretty clear and easy to understand. They're not trying to trip you up. But sometimes they don't write a question just perfectly. And this is one of those cases. Next, we've got a simple rule that Jasmine is on board longer than VJ. So anytime we're looking at this top row, we have to see V before J, right? And then here's the only other rule, and it's a tricky one, right? We've got, if Jasmine's still on board when it reaches Fundy, so we've got Fundy and then Jasmine, and then maybe, or Jasmine's off this way, right? So we see this or this. This might be a good way to write it. Then we know Greg is still on board when the van reaches Simcoe. Okay, so Simcoe and then Greg, or, Greg's off here somewhere, And now we're told that if it's not this way, so if Jasmine gets off before Fundy, Jasmine, Fundy, like so. Oh, wait, what am I doing there? That's not even an F. Then, Greg has to be off before Simcoe. And I put these kind of like staggered to indicate that these will be on different rows, you know, so you could imagine it like this. If you want, you can write the contrapositive of this, you know, which is that if Greg gets off before Simcoe, then you know that Jane has to be off before Fundy. So you could also do a chain like this. Basically, the most important thing here is to keep on top of these two rules kind of separately in your head and just quickly check them, because you don't have too many rules to work with here. So always just kind of quickly check whether we're in this world right here or this world over here where you see these guys matched up. And often it's tempting when you have a rule where it's this way or the other to try and, you know, break this out into two separate scenarios. But there's still a lot of flexibility of order with either of these scenarios, so I don't think it's the most useful thing to do. Not many rules to keep track of. Best to just kind of work with a main setup in mini diagrams. Okay, we're going to skip the acceptability question. Our first question that we're going to actually address is if Mineola is the first stop, so we know we've got M in 1, that puts L in second, 2, 3, 4, then if you want to keep going with this, this would be S or F, S or F. Well then, who is a complete and accurate list? What's a complete and accurate list of passengers who could possibly get off there, meaning at Mineola? Well, really, the good thing to see here is that there's only one rule that's going to actually affect that, and that's this JV rule. No way to have J there because then V is after and you're violating this rule, right? But other than that, there's no rules that should come into play that affect putting these other people in this spot, right? So that leaves you with D as the correct answer. It's really that simple, and a better test taker is going to have the confidence to say only this rule comes into play. They might take a quick look at this rule and see if it would cause any issues with maybe G being out front, but you know, you put G there, and then you put J right here, and that would be S at that point, right? And then this can be F, so V, J, and then Rosa's here. So once you know Greg can be on in the first spot, you can confidently circle D as your correct answer choice. Okay, next time we have Fundy as the first stop, so you know L second, 1, 2, and I'm just quickly making a little mini diagram for this. So then this back one is S and M, S and M. And then this is a time-consuming question because they give us an order, they give us complete orders, and we have to check if it could work out with this setup for the stops, right? So there's some things you can look at straight away, right? We know Rosa has to be in 3 or 4 because she's still on at Mineola. So do we see any place where Rosa got off too early? Yeah, that allows us to cross B off. This is basically like an acceptability question, right? You take the rules one at a time and see where they're violated given this setup. So Rosa gets off in the first 2 in B and E. That's no good, right? Then we take our next rule. You know you can't see J first ever, but that's not a problem. That doesn't get violated anywhere. So then I'm just kind of looking at these more individually. What's the problem with G, V, J, Rosa? Well, the issue is that J's still on at Fundy, so Greg has to still be on at Simcoe, and that's not the case. And we see the same issue with C, right? V, G, R, J. J is still on at Fundy. That means Greg still has to be on at Simcoe, but no, he got off at L, so C's gone as well. We're left with D as the only answer. And if you want to run a quick check, VJ rule is all good. Jasmine's off after Fundy, but then if Greg is in 3, you know he's possibly still on. You could make that Simcoe, and everything's good, right? And then Rose would hop out at Mineola. So 21D, correct answer. 22 is a tricky setup. We've got, let's put our 4 spaces out here. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're told Greg's still on board when the van reaches both L and S, not necessarily in that order, right? And he's the second one off the van. So we know Greg is here. Well, the only way, yeah, so then this is either LS or LS, right? And this is either Fundy or Mineola, and this is Fundy or Mineola. So this is our setup here for this problem. Well, the thing I would immediately see here is, like, what do we know about Rosa? Well, she has to be in Mineola, so she's either here or here. So is that something that comes up in the answer choices? That Rosa's still on board at some point? Yeah, I'm looking at C. She's still on board when it reaches Simcoe. That has to be true. If S is in the first 2, and she's getting off in 3 or 4, we know she's still on board when the van reaches Simcoe. So what I did was I made the next deduction that I could make given the situation, and then without doing any further work, I checked if it was the information that was going to answer the question, and sure enough, it was. So glad that worked out. 23 tells us Greg is not on board when it reaches Simcoe, right? And we discussed earlier that that means, like, contrapositive of this, that J has to get off before Fundy, right? So we're going to see G before S and J before Fundy. I might be looking straight away at what must be true given that setup. So we'd have, you know, V before J, and then before F, and that's a fixed order, right? And then we gotta have, so we need 2 people before Fundy happens at all, right? That puts Fundy in either the 3 or 4 spots. We don't know which. So we could just do a little, like, F here thing. And now, can we answer the question with this? Let's take a look. Greg on board when the van reaches Fundy. We don't know. Maybe it looks like he could hop off sometime before. Jasmine on board when the van reaches Mineola. We just don't know. It looks likely, but no, maybe you can put Mineola in one of these back 2 spots. Rosa on board when it reaches Fundy. We don't know. Must that be false? I don't know, you know? VJ is on board when the van reaches Fundy. Yeah, that has to be false. If we look at our diagram here, that V has to be out sometime before these Fundy spots, right? So again, this is always the classic pattern. I hung on to just one thing I could know, one inference, which was down here, that if we get this GS order, contrapositive of this, we know we have this JF order. And then I just saw what I could do with that. And rather than doing more work, I saw if I had answered the question already. And it turned out I had. And that might look like a little bit like magic, but all I'm doing is making one inference and then checking if it answers the question before I move on. And that's something that pros always do. Okay, so tough game, and I hope you were with me through that. I know that was a shaky explanation, but I hope it sorted things out for you. Talk to you soon. Bye.